Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane here, just about 100 meters or so away from the Third Energy, or it's Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy here in North Yorkshire. So as you can see, there's a whatever the collective noun is, that a prick of security guards or something like that. I'm not sure what the noun is. Anyway, they are very, very nervous. A busload of security came in last night, and this perhaps is in response to a very high level of internet chatter, which predicts that Greg Clark may actually sign off on Barclays Bank's application to frack here at Kirby, Misperton in North Yorkshire. So it seems that some of them are a bit camera shy. They're walking away along the back of the berm and just left a singular, whatever the singular noun is. Maybe it's not a prick, I don't know. But anyway, the singular noun for security guards to watch over me and hang on to my every word, no doubt. Anyway, let me come the other side of the camera now. So this is literally the Cusp. The kit has been sitting here for 3 weeks, and that's obviously costing Barclays Bank a pretty penny, but it's a real sort of drop in the ocean. It's small change to them, and the fact that they are here trading as Third Energy, which is deep in the financial doo-doo. There is no possibility of Third Energy ever paying tax, so effectively this is a bit of a tax scam for Barclays Bank, and we know that this whole industry is a Ponzi scheme anyway. Once it kicks off, they just have to keep on looking for new well sites, drilling new wells, fracking new wells, to keep the illusion running that you know, it's an industry that's actually got a future and can generate cash. Yet you don't have to look too hard to find that the bankruptcies associated with this industry, particularly in North America, where of course it's touted as the saviour to the national economy. I don't think much could be further from the truth, but the reality is that once you scratch beneath the surface, what you find isn't very pretty. So if Greg Clark does decide that he's going to put his political career on a proverbial knife edge by signing off on this, then I would counsel that people from right across the north of England, as I said last week, my calculation is that some 13 million people across this part of the country, from the Lancashire coast right across the North Yorkshire, well, Yorkshire coast, right down into Lincolnshire, will potentially be living within the proverbial spit of a frack pad. And you know, the evidence just keeps on giving. And in fact, I posted on Twitter an article this morning that's from exactly 5 years ago, where farmers in North Dakota, up around the Buchan shale play there, were starting to report that their livestock were dying and suffering from debilitating diseases. And you know, those who believe that that won't happen here are naive, because it's pretty much happened everywhere else. So of those 13 million people, obviously there are a number of those, unfortunately probably quite a significant number, that are just not interested. They have their heads buried deep in the proverbial sand. But for those who are starting to become aware of the bigger picture and become aware that basically the government really doesn't give a flying frack about what you, the constituent, thinks, they will simply plough ahead. So if you want to see what's likely to be coming on your doorstep, then perhaps take a trip up here to Kirby, Misperton, or across here, because nowhere in this area across the north of England is more than 90 minutes, a max 2 hours from Kirby, Misperton. And believe you me, once you witness a frack, then you will be newly motivated to try to ensure and do whatever it takes to make sure it doesn't rock up in your community. So, you know, it's going to be half a day or a day out of your time, but that day will be well worthwhile, and let me assure you that future generations will greatly appreciate your efforts. By the way, let me also say that unfortunately last week, after I proposed the idea that Saturday 2nd of December should start the new campaign to raise awareness that this is Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy, that are looking to initiate this first frack. And of course Barclays pulled off a very, very significant PR coup earlier this year, in fact 6 months ago in mid-May, where they announced that, oh, actually, you know, we're trying to divest ourselves, we're trying to sell Third Energy. No, they're not. But it worked brilliantly, because the rising campaign right across the country, where people were going into or outside of Barclays banks to let their customers know what Barclays were financing, came to a halt. So everyone went, oh, that's great, they're going to sell it. But no, they're not. Absolutely not. This is Barclays Bank trading as Third Energy. And don't let anything deter you from that. And of course, you know, take a bit of a look at Barclays history, because, you know, the Barclays family made their money on the back of slavery. So, you know, this is a bank, like pretty much all of the banks, that has no ethics, and they will do whatever it is that they think they can get away with to enhance their obscene profits. So let's just take a look at what will happen here if Greg Clark loses or succumbs to the phenomenal pressure that's clearly, you know, being put upon him to sign off on this. And as I, you know, have acknowledged, you know, Greg Clark is reckoned to be one of the smartest guys on the cabinet. He's quite a young guy. I think he's about 50 or so. So he's, you know, potentially got a bright political future ahead of him. Unless, of course, he signs off on this, and as expected, at some point, wherever that might be, the whole thing, the whole house of cards comes tumbling down, and his political career will be on the rocks, because he will be forever associated with the decision to kick this industry off, despite all the evidence from pretty much everywhere in the world suggesting that's a pretty bad idea. And like we've said before, this is just a test frack, and the pad here is absolutely rammed. It's unsafe. And last week the New Suffragettes raised their concerns with the councillors at North Yorkshire County Council in Pickering, in Northallerton, and basically they're like, well, we don't know. We assumed that somebody else was looking at this. Well, that's exactly what happened, and the Environment Agency seemed to be distancing themselves from this industry. And in fact, the Environment Agency have recently published a document which effectively lays out what they are not responsible for. Normally, they tend to say what they are responsible for and leave the rest blank. But they're now starting to actually spell out what they are not responsible for. And, you know, what we have is the regulatory bodies going, well, actually, it's him. And they go, no, 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 it's him. And the company's going, well, you know, we'll just send the reports in as agreed on a Friday afternoon. But, you know, it's up to you what you do with it. So, you know, the gold standard regulatory control, which we've always known is total mythology, then, you know, it's now starting to fall down around Greg Clark's ears. Let's take a look at what would happen here, because this is a test frack. And again, if they wanted to go to production, they're likely going to have to go through the whole process of getting planning permission to extend this pad, because it's rammed at the moment with I think 19 frack tanks, each with a capacity of, I think, something in the region of about 20,000 gallons or so. And in fact, the first frack, which is at a depth of 9,964 feet, or down to 9,984 feet, so the frack zone in each case is just 20 feet. But at that depth, they are going to be pumping 1,321 cubic meters of frack fluid, and that's 290,000 gallons. Well, 290,676 to be precise. But that's a fair chunk of water. So that's pretty much going to take the entire stock from the 19 tanks that they have here on site. So once they've run that first frack, then obviously they have to completely replenish all of the fluids, the water, in the frack tanks. Now, Third Energy acknowledge that they are only going to get back something between 40 and 60%. And in fact, we know that a frack master considers it to be an exceptional frack job if they get back just 40% of what they pump down the hole. So where does the other 60% go? Well, we have a very interesting quote from the technical manager of Quadrilla, who when asked that question basically said, well, we have no idea. And that's the problem. Where does it go? Because as we know elsewhere in the world, it's ended up in adjoining geology or in aquifers, or seeped out you know, some distance away into the surface, which is one of the reasons why this industry has rejected the idea of putting dyes in with their frack fluid for close on 2 decades. So if they get 40 to 60%, but let's say they get 50%, let's split the difference between what they say they're going to get back. That means that they're going to get back about 145,000 gallons of flowback water. Well, it's not just water, is it? Because it's not only the chemicals that they added to the solution, but it's also the debris that the fracking process drags out of the geology. And they're going to bring that back to the surface, and then they say they're going to dispose of it, but they don't say actually where, they just say an approved facility. But that means that they've got to truck off about 140,000 gallons or so. That's probably about 8-9 tankers worth. But they've got to get that away from here and get that to a waste treatment facility. Now, there's only 2 that I'm aware of in the northeast of England, and one is at Knostrop in Leeds, and the other one is the Northumbrian water facility at Bran Sands, just outside Redcar on Teeside. So if you live in those communities, i.e. Knostrop or Bran Sands, then you are potentially the target for the frack waste. And if we go back to what occurred at Priest Hall, nearly 7 years ago now, where United Utilities had the contract for removing the frack waste, but actually it was beyond their capability. So they quietly pumped something between 800,000 and 2 million gallons of the treated fluids into the Manchester Ship Canal without any third-party oversight, and then distributed the solids around other facilities, desperate to try and find a company that had a process to deal with these toxic solids. So it shouldn't be any great surprise that all of the companies and the regulatory bodies have been extremely reluctant to discuss the process by which this waste will be treated and disposed of. Of course, the other option that Third Energy have is to pump it into the adjoining well, KMA, or the re-injection well that they have just up the road in Pickering. And if you want to see what re-injection has done, then just take a look at Oklahoma, where it's become the re-injection capital in the United States. And over the last 9 years or so, Oklahoma has also become the earthquake capital of the United States. Once upon a time, that was the recognition of California. Now it's Oklahoma. So after they've done that first frack, got rid of the waste somewhere, then they go to the second stage. Now this is smaller, it's a little bit shallower. It's 9,056 feet to 9,076 feet, and they'll be pumping 170,000 gallons on that stage. So that takes up about 11 tanks of fluids. Then they've obviously got a, well, maybe they don't have to replenish that, because the next stage is the third stage, which is 8,699 feet down to 8,719 feet, and that's 115,000 gallons. So actually they could do stages 2 and 3, provided there's no waste, with the 19 tanks that they've got here, and then they would have to replenish them once again for stages 4 and 5. Stage 4 is 7,370 feet to 7,390 feet. That's 106,000 gallons. And then the final stage is at 6,965 feet down to 6,985 feet. And they need 7 tanks for the 102,000 gallons. Now, what is interesting about these numbers is that only the first stage of pumping 170,000 gallons, only that first stage would actually be, 290,000 gallons, only that first stage would be recognised as a frack under the political definition of a hydraulic fracture as per the Infrastructure Act of 2015. And of course, as I'm sure many of you watching are aware, then the Infrastructure Act was subsequently amended so that basically anything could be disposed down these deep boreholes without any further consultation with the local community. And as I've alluded to on numerous occasions in the past, there is the distinct possibility that the work of Professor Fergus Gibb at Sheffield University, looking into the deep borehole disposal of toxic nuclear waste, may actually be the real agenda here. So this is likely to be the first frack if Greg Clark signs it off whenever. There are apparently a couple of legal challenges that are in the process of being mounted, which will hopefully delay a little further and give Greg Clark perhaps more time to reflect on the magnitude of this decision. Because, you know, if we have a situation like in southern Queensland, which it was the Darling Downs, similar to this in terms of prime agricultural land, but is now effectively a wasteland. And that's, you know, an area the size of England in a state that's 7 times the size of the UK. So they may just dismiss it as the sacrifice zone that it is. So please keep an ear to the ground on what Greg Clark is doing, because Third Energy, Barclays Bank, will want to start firing up the pumps almost immediately he grants that permission. As I say, this kit's been sitting here for 3 weeks. There's obviously been a frack crew hanging around in the area somewhere for the last 3 weeks, waiting on the go-ahead. And well, you know, who knows? Maybe they've already got the nod that they'll be compensated by the government for any delay caused as a result of the government delaying its decision. So if that's the case, they're happy to sit here for, you know, as long as it takes. Well, I would like to think that that isn't the case, and that you know, this is a risk that is being picked up by Barclays Bank. Now, last week, some pro-frackers who were listening in, but only with half an ear to the live stream, picked up that I had made the observation that INEOS is owned by Barclays Bank. Of course, that's not what I said. INEOS is owned by Jim Ratcliffe. It is a private company, no third-party oversight, no shareholder oversight, a private company. But that said, Jim Ratcliffe has certainly proved himself to be the master of managing corporate debt. And actually, there's not that many banks that aren't into INEOS in some way, shape or form. And as is often acknowledged, you know, if you owe the bank 3,000, then the bank are your problem. But if you owe them 300 million or 3 billion or whatever, then you know, you're the bank's problem, and they're going to do whatever they can to keep you sweet. So Jim Ratcliffe has dug a massive debt hole, obviously backed by the assets of INEOS. But meanwhile, of course, raking in a significant personal fortune in excess of £5 billion. And just seeing here, we've got the tankers going in with a police escort. If you could just see that over the hedge there in the distance. So right on schedule here at about 8:45 or so. So these will be topping up the frack tanks. So I still only have my lone security guard here on the corner of the well site. But hopefully, once, assuming Greg Clark signs off on this, we need a lot of people to be standing here and witnessing this, recording it, taking the video, recording the soundtracks, because there's only 8,000 horsepower here on this well site. If this industry does get into production, it's going to be a lot more than 8,000 horsepower. But the residents of Kirby Misperton and some of the adjoining farms here will get a taste of what it sounds like when these pumps are ramped up and pumping these fluids down at enormous pressure to create what is effectively likely to be a quite minimal gas flow. Anyway, that's pretty much about it from me today. I was supposed to be joined by Eddie Thornton today, who's just come back from a week's break. Unfortunately, Eddie and a couple of others managed to get themselves arrested last night. Now, as I said, you know, a busload of security came down yesterday, so it seems that you know, they're very nervous, which might indicate that they know something about what Greg Clark is due to announce later today. Now, please share this. Thank you for watching right through, but please share it, because it is on a different Facebook profile than previous, and I don't have the capacity to share quite so widely from this profile. So please help share this around, and let's try to ensure that as wider population as is possible comprehends what is about to be unleashed here by Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy. And I'll be back hopefully with Eddie Thornton alongside me tomorrow morning at 8:30.